Hi, my name is Jeremy Jimenez, an associate professor in the Foundations and Social Advocacy Department at SUNY Cortland. Thank you for your interest in our piece, Indigenizing Environmental Sustainability Curriculum and Pedagogy, Confronting Our Global Ecological Crisis via Indigenous Sustainabilities, co-published with geography professor Peter Kabachnik at CUNY Staten Island. Our article is a points of departure essay, which is characterized by being more of an advocacy piece and somewhat shorter in length than a traditional journal article. First, some background. Some years back, Dr. Kabachnik and I, along with over 500 other scholars from around the world, were co-signatories, in a personal, not institutional capacity, to a letter warning about the relatively imminent risk of our global industrial system unraveling due to a combination of ecological degradation and its myriad consequences for threatening most complex life on Earth, coupled with the reality that we're rapidly running out of resources to support a population of 8+ billion humans, especially as many, if not most of us, are keen to pursue the kind of modern lifestyles brought to us by economic growth, which can and will never be sustainable. Particularly frustrating are those advocating a variety of so-called green delusions. Whether it's green growth, green investment, green energy, they're just marketing labels that only offer more of the same industrially driven destruction. As a former high school teacher for 10 years and current professor of future teachers for the past 6 years, I'm very invested in education as a key tool for both addressing historical and ongoing inequality, as well as reimagining better ways to ensure a livable future for humans and non-humans alike. But similarly, the enterprise of higher education, being embedded in, and thus committed to upholding, our global industrial civilization, is similarly ill preparing our students, and in the case of teacher candidates, their future students as well, for how radically we need to let go of our hyper-industrialized and consumer-driven lifestyles to restore our relationship with our natural ecosystems. Which brings me to our point of departure article. We've structured this essay in two parts. The first part first reviews what's already happening in many universities regarding their promotion of sustainable development and briefly reviews the work of others critical about the concept itself. Our first contribution is to focus on how many higher ed institutions, academic presentations and articles, curriculum guides, etc., narrowly focus on the problem of climate change while paying insufficient attention to, if they address at all, any of our equally if not more pressing environmental issues, such as biodiversity loss, soil degradation, and plastic and other forms of industrial pollution. We posit that this could be because the supposed solutions to climate change don't fundamentally challenge the devastating nature of our modern lives. Narrowly focusing on industrial solutions like solar panels and wind turbines, direct air capture, etc., that only address stabilizing or even lowering carbon emissions will do nothing to prevent mercury contamination in our rivers and oceans, continued soil degradation brought to us by the overuse of Haber process-developed fertilizers, or the myriad ecological cascades occurring as keystone species and ecosystems die off. Carbon emissions are just one symptom of our ecological overshoot, and so focusing there doesn't really get at the root of the problem, which is continued industrialization and how it's ravaging the natural world. Discussions about climate change are often about doing more, build more, invent more, buy more, whereas most of the other planetary boundaries actually require us to do less. Cut down artificial fertilizer and pesticide use, stop cutting down forests, stop producing pointless consumer goods which pollute our environment. Basically, this is the modern development paradigm. We in wealthy countries enjoy our high standards of living due to a combination of exploiting fossil fuels along with much of the global South's resources, both materially and human. The global North preaches, yes, we're cutting down your forests, subjecting you to miserable agricultural and industrial working conditions, mining your copper and cobalt, and in doing all of these, degrading your land base. But just keep working hard, deal with the health consequences, and little by little you, or maybe your children, will be able to enjoy the comforts and privileges of modernity, imported consumer goods, streaming videos, more reliable electricity, etc. And if progress towards raising your standards of living seems stalled or in retreat, we'll diagnose the problem as you not having enough modernity. You need more computers and roads and trade agreements and export-driven industries. Meanwhile, the rising seas are poisoning your groundwater, heat waves are getting harder to bear, your soil is less productive from overuse of industrial fertilizers, and there's more plastic trash in your rivers and beaches. So this is the first step, moving beyond climate change and incorporating lessons about our other planetary boundaries in university curriculum, programming, and research. But this is more about providing a more complex, systems thinking approach to diagnosing our predicament. We also wanted to address how universities could and should respond by raising the following question. What alternative curricular and pedagogical strategies might be better suited to pursue a more tenable sustainability as opposed to the green growth fantasies currently proffered by so many advocates of climate change mitigation? And this is what brings us to the second part of our essay, where we advocate that universities should find ways to incorporate what we're referring to as Indigenous sustainabilities. Indigenous sustainabilities is a term we're using to acknowledge that many Indigenous cultures see themselves in relationship with their respective bioregions, which in turn has generated cultures that have long track records of caretaking their region for long-term sustainability. It is this complex set of pluralistic, local, embodied knowledges and practices of various environments that we think higher ed institutions should turn to for our learning. We have to appreciate this stark fact. Indigenous people make up about 5% of the global population, yet they are custodians for roughly 80 to 85% of the Earth's remaining biodiversity. Clearly, Indigenous communities worldwide are often better exemplars for sustainability than the dead-end industrial solutions proffered by many modernist elites. We argue that higher ed institutions should focus on reshaping sustainability curriculum and pedagogy to promote the notion that our collective survival depends on how well and quickly we heed the voices and perspectives of the relatively few people in the world that are actually living sustainably. To begin with, universities can lead the way to incorporate more voices and texts into all of their course offerings and events. For instance, at my institution of SUNY Cortland, our university-wide common read next year is Braiding Sweetgrass, written by Dr. Robin Wall-Kimmerer, who also resides in our bioregion. The next step would be for higher ed institutions to reach out to work, where possible, with their own regional Indigenous communities to learn from them. Admittedly, this is not to be taken lightly. It's important to recognize the trauma that Western institutions and their representatives have inflicted on Indigenous communities for centuries, and be sensitive how many Indigenous persons might be understandably unwilling to participate in such endeavors. So this is no quick fix, but rather a call for commitment by faculty, staff, and students to build that trust through building relationships, with this emphasis on relationships being the cornerstone to many Indigenous communities all around the world. So we invite you to read our article, see it in conversation with the other pieces in this journal's special issue, and please feel free to reach out if there's anything about what I've said or what we've written that you'd like to discuss further. Thank you.